Good day, this is Peter Varhol with Pine Software, and I'm here today to talk a bit about requirements and Agile. In particular, how do you use requirements within an Agile context while also keeping up with the rapid change and the feedback and the modifications to the project that Agile frequently requires. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about why Agile works. In fact, the reason why Agile is moving into the mainstream is that it succeeds where the waterfall model often fails. With the quick development effort and the ability to match business needs with development realities, we're able to reduce wasted time and effort as much as possible. In particular, products that involve continuous product development and enhancement benefit from Agile. User stories are an integral part of Agile methodologies, and they're great for planning, but oftentimes they're poor for communicating specific needs. We use frequently story cards or their electronic equivalent to capture the details of the product requirements, but if we have too many cards, then sometimes you lose the ability to understand what they all mean to be able to integrate them into a whole. In the meantime, requirements still remain popular. They're used by many customers and end user communities, oftentimes for contractual reasons. You can put requirements into a contract and make them binding. They're used in a lot of regulated software development that are governed by federal or other government regulations or industry regulations. Because they're specifically written in that you will have requirements. Oftentimes they're also used for cultural or reporting reasons. So we may be using requirements. Requirements may be a fact of our development lives in some form or another for quite a long time. And also requirements go beyond function. Story cards often describe how a particular feature, what a particular feature does and how it'll be used. Requirements can be non-functional too. They can deal with maintainability, portability, localizability, security, and scalability. Stories don't do well with such non-functional requirements. So the question is, if you've got an environment where your team is using an Agile methodology, yet your users or your customers are using requirements, or you're required to use requirements for some purpose, is there any way for them to coexist? And the answer to that is yes, of course there is. Agile development methodologies are very flexible and they can incorporate requirements. In particular, requirements provide the agreement if you need that regulatory or contractual agreement, or if you need some very specific points that both the user community and the team can agree on, while user stories can provide the context, how those features will be used in the actual application, how the users will employ these features. At the same time, testers test the requirements, but user stories provide direction for the development of the test cases. How about change? Because change is a fact of life in Agile methodologies, and it occurs frequently in response to user feedback. Changing requirements means that we need to adapt to user needs. Requirements, however, are more structured and organized, and testers are developing test cases to the requirements. The way you do that is have traceability, and not only between your requirements and their corresponding user stories, but also traceability between the requirements and all artifacts in the Agile development methodology. So the way that you should proceed when you're combining both requirements and Agile is to start with requirements. Customers are often better at initially providing requirements. Then you can go in and take those requirements and decompose them into user stories. Ask your users to describe features, stories about how those features will be used in carrying out their jobs. These stories are tied in or linked in to the related requirement. They provide the context for the requirements, and they help direct both the developers. The developers in the design and coding decision and the testers in the development of test cases. So once you've defined requirements and associated user stories with those requirements, you need to share those requirements in user stories. All stakeholders in the project have to know what features are needed, and developers and testers have to know the context that are provided by those user stories. The testers, because you have requirements as the agreement, oftentimes a formal agreement between the team and the user community or the customer, you test the requirements, but the user stories provide the context for the test cases. The user stories in particular can guide the test case structure, the sequence, the amount of detail that the test cases have. But you do test to requirements, and you match defects. As you find defects, you link the defects not only to the corresponding requirements through the test cases, but you link the defects to the user stories too, so you understand that both are in fact affected. So when the requirements change, when feedback comes from the customers and say, this wasn't quite what we had in mind, or we need to do something a little bit different in response to our changing business needs, everybody has to know this. So not only are the user stories changing, but the corresponding requirements are changing. So the team has to re-examine the user stories that go along with those requirements as they change, and the testers have to validate their existing test cases to ensure that they're still relevant, or to initiate changes to those test cases if they have to change. Feedback from the user community or the customer may change requirements or user stories, or both of them. So what you have to do is you have to treat, when I first got involved in software development, oftentimes requirements were fixed, or the word that was frequently used was frozen. So you freeze requirements, and they don't change for a long period of time until the end of the development effort. That doesn't work today. You have to treat, in particular with regards to an agile methodology, you have to treat the requirements as a living document. They can no longer be cast in stone. But you also need to know that what else might have to change in response to changes to requirements. And that's what the linking between the requirements and the user stories, test cases, defects, and the rest of the artifacts does for you. It has to be lightweight traceability, because we want to be able to do it quick, and we don't want to spend a lot of time in our tools. So returning to agility, what we have here is a division of labor. The requirements are the agreement between the customer or the user and the agile team, but the user stories are the internal representation of that agreement. The team works with the customer to create those user stories from the requirements, and changes to the user stories get reflected back to the requirements. At the same time, because the requirements provide that agreement, testers test the requirement, and the user stories provide the context for both the development teams and the testers as they're going through the development and testing process. The requirements in the user stories are managed side by side, so that changes in one are reflected in changes to the other. And so as those changes occur in response to user or customer feedback, they get reflected in the test cases and other development team artifacts. So in summary, I'd just like to say that increasingly requirements and agile methodologies have to get along. Agile methodologies are becoming mainstream. Requirements aren't going to go away anytime soon. So both are realities in the post-waterfall world. However, requirements can be associated with user stories. There is a role for both, and both can adapt as the user needs change and are refined over time. And projects will benefit through the development of better software faster. Thank you very much. Once again, this is Peter Varhol with Cpine Software. Look for us at Eurostar 2011. Thank you.